In the summer of 1997, Gabriel Ford and his girlfriend Nadia Clark set out for what was supposed to be a perfect weekend getaway. The kind of trip that would cement their love. A trip filled with romance, laughter, and the promise of a new chapter in their lives. They had been together for 3 years, and Gabriel, a man of quiet resolve, had been secretly saving up for the perfect moment to propose. The engagement ring, a beautiful pink diamond nestled within a delicate dolphin motif, had been chosen with care. Nadia adored dolphins, and Gabriel knew it was the kind of ring she would love for the rest of her life. Eagle Cap Wilderness, deep within the heart of the Eagle Cap National Forest, seemed like the perfect destination. A secluded, almost untouched paradise, perfect for camping. No one would disturb them here. It would be just Gabriel and Nadia, surrounded by nature's beauty and the stillness of the forest. Or so they thought. As they drove deeper into the forest, Gabriel felt a strange unease creep over him. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the trees, though beautiful, seemed to loom over the narrow road like silent sentinels. It was beautiful, yes, but there was an unsettling quiet to it. Nothing stirred. Not even the birds were singing. "Are you okay, Gabe?" Nadia asked, noticing his distraction. She had always been able to sense when something was off with him. "Yeah, just tired," Gabriel lied, trying to shake off the feeling. He didn't want to ruin the mood. Not when this was supposed to be their perfect weekend. They arrived at a secluded clearing, hidden away from any trails or campsites. Just the two of them in the forest. Gabriel quickly set up the tent, trying to focus on the task at hand. Nadia helped, though she was more interested in the beauty of their surroundings. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. It should have been idyllic, a scene out of a dream. But as the evening descended, Gabriel's unease deepened. The light dimmed too quickly, and the distant howls of a lone wolf made his skin crawl. Nadia noticed it too, but she laughed it off. "It's just the wilderness, Gabe. We're not in the city anymore. Nature's loud when it wants to be." They built a fire and cooked their dinner under the pale orange light. Gabriel tried to relax, tried to enjoy the quiet serenity of the night, but something gnawed at him. The strange clicking noises he began to hear, almost like wood snapping, set his nerves on edge. He scanned the trees, but there was nothing there. No animals, no movement. Just the dark, silent woods. By the time they crawled into their tent, the air had grown cold, and the sky was filled with stars. Nadia, ever the optimist, snuggled up to Gabriel, her warmth comforting in the otherwise cold atmosphere. Gabriel kissed her forehead, his hand instinctively reaching into his pocket, where he had tucked the small velvet box holding the ring. But that night, sleep did not come easily. Gabriel was jolted awake in the dark. At first, it was the sound of something scraping against the trees, faint and distant. Then the clicks, sharp, rapid, like the sound of hundreds of insects or bones grinding against one another. The forest felt alive, but in a way that made Gabriel's stomach twist with dread. He lay still, listening to the strange, almost rhythmic noises outside the tent. It wasn't natural. He turned to Nadia, expecting her to be fast asleep beside him, but she wasn't there. Panic hit him instantly. He pushed the blanket aside and scrambled out of the tent. "Nadia!" he called, his voice shaking. The fire had burned down to a few embers, casting eerie shadows around the campsite. He walked to the edge of the clearing, his breath quickening as he scanned the woods. "Nadia!" he shouted again, his voice now frantic. The clicking continued, louder, closer. His mind raced. Where could she have gone? Then out of the silence he heard it, a soft whisper carried on the wind, a voice that sent chills down his spine. "Gabriel, get out of here." He froze, his blood running cold as the hairs on his neck stood up. The voice, Nadia's voice, was distorted, unnatural, like it was coming from somewhere deep within the forest. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the voice seemed to be coming from everywhere. "Nadia!" His voice cracked, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned to run back to the tent, but before he could reach it, something caught his eye. There, standing just beyond the firelight, was Nadia. She was naked, her skin glistening with something dark, almost like blood. Her eyes were wide, staring ahead, unfocused. She didn't seem to see him, or maybe she was blind to him now. She moved slowly, like she was in a trance, her steps staggered and unnatural. "Nadia, what's happening?" Gabriel's voice trembled as he stepped forward, his hands outstretched. But Nadia didn't respond. Instead, she lifted her head, her face twisted in terror. "You need to leave, Gabe, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They're coming." Gabriel could barely comprehend what she was saying. His mind screamed for him to run, but his body refused to move. He stared at her, at the blood on her skin, and the look in her eyes, the utter emptiness of it all. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The clicking noise grew louder, and Gabriel suddenly felt it, a dark, oppressive presence closing in. He turned, ready to flee, but then Nadia spoke again. "Leave me," she whispered, her voice distant and broken. "I can't leave. I'll never leave, but you have to go." The words hung in the air, heavy with a terrible finality. Gabriel's heart raced as he stumbled backward, his mind scrambling to make sense of the nightmare unfolding before him. He wanted to reach out to Nadia, to hold her, to wake her from whatever dark trance she had fallen into. But some primal instinct, told him that it was already too late. She was no longer the woman he had fallen in love with. The person standing before him was a hollow shell, her eyes empty and wild. "Gabriel," she whispered again, but this time her voice was barely audible, swallowed by the wind. "You have to leave now, please. I can't save you." With a burst of panic, Gabriel turned and ran, the sound of his boots hitting the forest floor drowning out everything else. His mind was clouded with fear and confusion. He didn't even think about the car. He just needed to get away. The clicking noise, that unnerving sound like bones scraping against rocks, grew louder. And now there was something else too. The unmistakable sound of footsteps following him. For a split second, he dared to glance over his shoulder. There, in the fading glow of the firelight, he saw Nadia, still moving, still walking toward him with that blank, vacant expression on her face. Her skin was slick with dark crimson, but she wasn't bleeding. Not in the way she should have been. No, it was something else. Something wrong. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the dense trees, not caring where he was going. His only thought was to escape, to outrun whatever had claimed Nadia. The forest, which had once seemed peaceful and serene, now felt like a living, breathing nightmare, dark, claustrophobic, and full of hidden terrors. Every rustle in the trees, every snap of a twig underfoot, made him flinch, made him wonder if the dark figures Nadia had warned him about were closing in. He could feel the eyes on him, watching him from the shadows. They were close, too close. The chill in the air prickled his skin, and he felt a tightening in his chest as though the forest itself was suffocating him. He kept running, his mind a jumbled mess of terror, but the path seemed to stretch on forever. The clicking grew louder, more frantic, and now in his panic, he could swear he heard something else. Something more distinct, whispers, low guttural voices that seemed to come from the very trees themselves. Get out now!" The voices murmured in unison, and Gabriel's mind began to unravel. His feet moved faster, faster, until his body burned with exhaustion. He had to get to the car. He had to get to safety. But when he finally burst through the trees and into the open clearing, the sight of the car, his only means of escape, sent a new wave of horror crashing into his chest. There, standing by the driver's side, was Nadia. Her eyes were wide and empty, her face twisted in an unnatural grin. She stood perfectly still, as though she were waiting for him. "Nadia!" Gabriel shouted, his voice raw with panic. But she didn't respond. She just stood there, her bloodied skin gleaming in the moonlight. There was something wrong, something profoundly wrong with the way she was standing. He didn't know how to explain it, didn't know if she was still human. Whatever was in her had taken hold of her, and he was terrified to know how much of Nadia was still left. "Nadia, please!" Gabriel pleaded, stepping toward her cautiously. "You need to snap out of it. We need to leave. We can go home. We can—" "You can't save me," she interrupted in a hollow voice. "You should never have come here, Gabriel. You should never have come." Her voice sent a chill down his spine. He could feel the ground beneath him shifting, the world around him beginning to distort. The clicking noise was deafening now, rising into a maddening crescendo, and as he looked beyond Nadia, he saw them. Figures. Tall, shadowy beings that seemed to blend into the forest itself. Their elongated limbs moving unnaturally. Their faces were obscured, but their presence was undeniable. The dark figures were surrounding them, closing in from all sides. They were the source of the clicking. Whatever they were ancient and malevolent, born from the very heart of the wilderness. "Run, Gabriel!" Nadia screamed, her voice desperate now, but there was no fear in her eyes. She was no longer herself, no longer trying to save him. She was trying to warn him, but it was too late. Gabriel turned on his heel and sprinted toward the car, his hands shaking as he fumbled for the door handle. The figures were almost upon him now, and the night seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. He slid into the driver's seat, his hands slick with sweat as he gripped the wheel. He locked the doors and started the engine, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. But as the engine roared to life, he glanced into the rearview mirror. Nadia stood in the clearing, her bloodied figure still motionless. But now she was surrounded by the shadowy figures. Their long, bony hands reached out toward her, and Gabriel could see, with horrifying clarity, that they were not merely reaching for her. They were pulling her into the darkness, her body jerking unnaturally as they dragged her away. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal, tires screeching against the gravel as he tore down the narrow forest road, his mind spinning with panic and disbelief. He didn't look back. He couldn't. As he sped away, the woods seemed to close in behind him, as though they were trying to swallow him whole. He didn't know if he was being chased, if the figures were still following him, but he couldn't bring himself to check. All he knew was that Nadia was gone, taken by whatever dark force inhabited those woods. And he was alone and haunted by the terror of that night. But as Gabriel drove, his terror deepened, and a chilling thought began to settle into the pit of his stomach. Nadia's voice, her warning, asterisk, it wasn't for him to leave. It had been for him to asterisk, stay asterisk. The story ends here, leaving unanswered questions that will haunt Gabriel for the rest of his life. What truly happened in those woods? What were the dark figures, and why did they want Nadia? Would Gabriel ever be able to escape the terror of that night? Only the wilderness knows the answers.